The sun was at its peak, casting a burning heat across the streets of Lagos. Amid the chaotic hustle of the busy city, Amina sat on the corner of a crowded market street, her tired eyes scanning the crowd. Her clothes, once bright and colorful, were now faded and frayed from years of wear. She didn't mind, though. It was the only life she had known for years. Amina was an orange seller. But more than that, she was a survivor. Every morning, she walked miles from the small shelter she called home, a rundown, forgotten corner of the city, to the heart of Lagos, where she would set up her small stall, hoping to make enough money to buy food for the day. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. She had lost everything over the years: her family, her dreams, her dignity. Life had been harsh, leaving her with nothing but a basket of oranges, a small smile, and the determination to keep going, day after day. As the crowd swarmed past, Amina called out in a soft voice, "Oranges. Fresh and sweet, only 50 naira." She repeated the words over and over, trying to grab the attention of passers-by. But the busy city rarely noticed her. People were too busy with their own lives to care about the homeless woman selling oranges on the street. Amina didn't mind. She had grown used to the indifference of the world. She had learned to shut out the sting of rejection, the harsh glances, and the dismissive waves. All she wanted was to sell her oranges and get by. That was the reality of her life. But on this particular day, something was different. From across the street, Amina noticed a man walking toward her. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with an air of confidence. His sharp features were chiseled, and his dark eyes seemed to reflect the wealth and power that came with his every step. He wore an expensive suit, the kind she had only seen in magazines, and carried a leather briefcase in one hand. Amina was used to seeing men like him. Rich, powerful, and unbothered by the struggles of people like her. But today, there was something about him that caught her attention. He paused in front of her, his eyes briefly meeting hers. "How much for an orange?" he asked in a deep, calm voice. Amina blinked, a little surprised that someone like him would stop. 50 naira, sir," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. She was always cautious around the wealthy, never sure if they would buy or just walk away dismissively. He smiled slightly and nodded. "I'll take one." Amina handed him a fresh orange, her fingers brushing against his as she did so. She felt a strange jolt of electricity at the touch. She quickly looked away, embarrassed, as she took the money he handed her. "Thank you," she said softly, almost too quietly to hear. But he had already turned away, walking back into the crowd. Amina watched him go, a strange feeling lingering in her chest. She had no idea why, but something about that brief exchange had made her heart race. She had seen rich men come and go before, but there was something different about him. Something in the way he looked at her, something in the way he had spoken to her without judgment. She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. It didn't matter. He was just another man. She couldn't afford to waste time thinking about him. She had to keep selling her oranges. But for the rest of the day, she couldn't shake the memory of the handsome billionaire who had bought her orange. She didn't know it yet, but this brief encounter was the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. Amina continued her life as she always had, selling oranges on the busy streets of Lagos, but something had shifted in her heart. For days after her brief encounter with the billionaire, Daniel, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She wasn't used to letting people in, especially men like him, men who lived in mansions, drove expensive cars, and rarely noticed people like her. But Daniel had been different. It wasn't just his wealth that intrigued her, it was the kindness in his eyes, the way he hadn't looked down on her, the way he had spoken to her like she mattered. The next day, as Amina sat on her usual corner, calling out her familiar sales pitch, she saw him again. Daniel walked down the street in his usual suit, a sleek black one that matched his handsome, confident demeanor. This time, he didn't pass by. "Good morning," he greeted her, his deep voice carrying easily through the bustling crowd. Amina's heart skipped a beat. She blinked, unsure of what to say, before responding shyly, "Good morning, sir. How may I help you today?" Daniel smiled, his gaze softening. "I'll take another orange." Amina handed him one, trying her best to keep her hands steady. When he paid her, their fingers touched once more, and again, that strange jolt of electricity ran through her. She quickly withdrew her hand, feeling flustered. "I see you here every day," Daniel said, his eyes searching hers. "How are you?" Amina hesitated. She wasn't used to rich men asking about her. They didn't care. They were too busy with their own lives to pay attention to someone like her. Still, something about Daniel felt different. She took a deep breath and, for the first time in a long while, decided to speak freely. "I'm surviving," she said softly. "It's not easy, but I manage. Every day is a struggle, but I make it through." Daniel nodded, understanding. "I admire your resilience," he said, his voice filled with genuine respect. Amina looked at him, surprised by his words. "Thank you," she replied, unsure of what else to say. For a moment, there was a silence between them. It wasn't awkward, but comfortable. There was something about him that made her feel seen, something that made her feel like she wasn't just a homeless woman selling oranges. "Do you come here often?" Amina asked, suddenly curious. It had only been a few days, but she had already begun to look forward to seeing him. "I come through this area for business," Daniel explained. "I work around here a lot." Amina nodded. "I see." After a moment, Daniel looked at her again. "Would you like to grab a coffee sometime? I'd love to hear more about you, your story." Amina's heart skipped. She was taken aback. She had never imagined that someone like Daniel would want to spend time with her. She was just a homeless woman on the street, nothing special. But the way he was looking at her made her feel different. Like maybe, just maybe, she was worth getting to know. "Coffee?" Amina repeated, unsure if she had heard correctly. Daniel smiled again. "Yes. I think you have a lot to say, and I'd like to listen." Amina felt a wave of warmth rush over her. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. Not for her circumstances, but for who she truly was. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. "I would like that," Amina said, her voice soft but filled with hope. She didn't know what would come of it, but she knew she had to take the chance. She had spent too long hiding from the world. Maybe this was her opportunity to step out of the shadows and into something brighter. The next few days passed quickly. Amina met Daniel for coffee, just as he had suggested. They sat in a small cafe by the corner of the street, away from the noise and bustle of Lagos. It was quiet, almost peaceful. For the first time in a long while, Amina felt a sense of calm. She didn't have to worry about the stares of passers-by or the harshness of the streets. In this moment, she was just Amina. And across from her was Daniel, a man who was no longer a distant figure but someone who had shown genuine interest in her. Their conversation flowed easily, and Amina found herself opening up in a way she hadn't done in years. She told him about her past, the loss of her family, and the way life had thrown her into the streets. She spoke about the pain of losing everything and the loneliness that had followed. Daniel listened intently, his eyes filled with empathy, never interrupting, never judging. "I never asked for this life," Amina said softly, staring into her coffee cup. "But somehow, it's the life I ended up with." Daniel's voice was quiet, filled with understanding. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns. But I can see that you're strong, Amina. Not everyone could survive what you've been through." Amina looked up at him, surprised by the sincerity in his words. She smiled, but it was a bittersweet smile. "Thank you. It's hard sometimes. But I don't want to be defined by my circumstances. I want more. I want to change." Daniel's gaze softened as he leaned forward. "You're already on the right path. You've made it this far, and that's no small thing." But even as they shared these moments, Amina couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. She had always lived a life of struggle. The streets had been her home, her survival instinct her closest companion. But now, as Daniel spoke of possibilities, of opportunities, a fear began to rise in her heart. Could she really step into his world? Could she leave behind everything she had known? And if she did, would she lose herself in the process? As the days passed, Amina began to distance herself from Daniel, unsure of the path she was on. She enjoyed their conversations, their growing connection, but something inside her held her back. She was terrified of being judged. The wealthy, successful people Daniel surrounded himself with would never accept someone like her. She wasn't sure if she could handle the stares, the whispers, or the feeling of being out of place in a world she didn't belong to. One afternoon, while Amina was selling oranges, she saw Daniel walking down the street with a group of his friends. They were laughing and talking amongst themselves, dressed in their expensive clothes and designer shoes. Amina watched them from a distance, her heart heavy. She couldn't help but feel like an outsider in their world. How could someone like her fit in with them? How could she ever belong? That evening, as she sat on her usual corner, she felt a wave of doubt wash over her. The bright lights of the city seemed to blur as her mind raced. She had grown used to the harshness of her life. It was all she knew. The thought of stepping into Daniel's world, a world of wealth and luxury, terrified her. She was afraid of being exposed, of being judged for who she was. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of change. But as she sat there, lost in her thoughts, a voice broke through her internal turmoil. "Amina?" She looked up, startled to see Daniel standing in front of her. His expression was warm, but there was a flicker of concern in his eyes. "I haven't seen you around lately," he said softly. "Everything okay?" Amina forced a smile, trying to hide the doubt swirling inside her. "I've just been busy," she replied, her voice trailing off. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing that something was wrong. "You don't have to pretend with me, Amina. I know something's bothering you." Amina sighed, feeling the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. "It's nothing. Just life, you know." Daniel stepped closer, his voice gentle. "You don't have to do this alone. Whatever it is, I'm here." Amina felt her heart flutter in her chest. His kindness was overwhelming, but it only made her doubt herself more. How could someone like him care about someone like her? She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "Daniel, I don't belong in your world. I'm just a street vendor. I've been living on the streets for years. I don't know how to fit into a life like yours. I'm scared that if I try, I'll only disappoint you." Daniel shook his head, a soft smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Amina, you're not defined by where you come from. I don't care about your past. I care about who you are now. And who you are is someone strong, someone worthy of love, of happiness." But Amina couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't enough. She wasn't sure if she could face the world Daniel lived in, with its wealth and status. She didn't know if she could handle the rejection, the judgment that might come with it. "I'm not ready," Amina whispered, looking down at her feet. Daniel placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to be ready. You just have to take one step at a time." Amina looked up at him, her heart torn. She wanted to believe in him, in herself. But the fear was too strong. She stepped back, forcing a smile onto her lips. "I need time to think, Daniel. I'm sorry." Daniel nodded, understanding. I'll give you all the time you need, Amina. But know this, whatever you decide, I'm here for you." As he walked away, Amina stood there, her heart heavy with doubt. Could she ever bridge the gap between the life she had known and the life that Daniel was offering? Or was she destined to remain in the shadows, afraid to step into the light? The days that followed were filled with internal struggle for Amina. She continued selling her oranges, but her mind was elsewhere. The world around her seemed to blur, her thoughts consumed by Daniel and the choices she had to make. Each encounter with him made her heart race, but it also deepened the conflict within her. Her life had always been about survival. The streets, though unforgiving, were familiar. They were her reality, and she had learned to adapt to them. But Daniel's world was different. It was a world of luxury and comfort, a world that seemed so far removed from the one she knew. She wasn't sure if she could ever truly belong in that world, no matter how much she longed for something more. One evening, as Amina sat by the corner of the busy market, she saw Daniel walking towards her. His usual confident stride was now accompanied by a sense of purpose, as if he had made a decision. He stopped in front of her, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. "Amina, I've been thinking," he said, his voice firm. "I want to offer you something. A chance to start over, to leave this life behind." Amina's heart skipped a beat. She had heard this before, offers from kind strangers, promises of a better life, but this time, something was different. There was a sincerity in Daniel's eyes that made her pause. "I want to help you," he continued. "I can get you a place to stay, provide for you, help you get back on your feet. I can give you everything you've ever dreamed of, Amina." Amina stared at him, her breath caught in her throat. He was offering her everything, the chance to leave her old life behind, to step into a world filled with comfort and security. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this offer came with a price. If she accepted, she would have to leave the streets, leave everything she had known. It was a huge risk. "I don't know, Daniel," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I've lived this way for so long. I don't know if I can just walk away from it all. What if I fail? What if I don't fit into your world? What if I'm just not enough?" Daniel stepped closer, his hand gently cupping her face. "You're already enough, Amina. You've always been enough. You don't have to be perfect, you don't have to fit into anyone's mold. I love you for who you are. And I'll be there with you every step of the way, no matter what." Amina's eyes filled with tears. She had never known love like this. She had never felt so seen, so valued. But the fear still lingered in her chest. She didn't want to lose herself. She didn't want to become someone else, someone she wasn't. "I don't know if I can be the person you want me to be," she whispered, her voice filled with doubt. "I don't know if I can live in your world. I'm scared, Daniel. I'm scared of losing myself." Daniel smiled, his thumb brushing away a tear from her cheek. "You won't lose yourself, Amina. You'll only grow. You'll become the person you're meant to be. And I'll be right here, supporting you." Amina felt her heart tugging in two directions. On one hand, she longed to take the chance, to step into a new life with Daniel, to leave behind the pain and struggles of the past. But on the other hand, she feared what that change might mean. Would she lose her independence? Would she lose the sense of self that had kept her going all these years? For days, she struggled with the decision, torn between the safety and comfort that Daniel offered and the life she had always known. Finally, after much deliberation, Amina made a choice. She went to Daniel's office, her heart pounding in her chest. As she walked through the sleek, modern building, she couldn't help but feel out of place. The polished floors, the expensive furnishings, the high-end technology, everything screamed wealth, a world she had never been a part of. She felt small, insignificant in comparison to the people around her. But as she walked into Daniel's office, she saw him standing by the window, looking out at the city below. When he turned and saw her, his face lit up with a smile that melted her heart. "You came," he said softly, his eyes filled with hope. Amina nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I came to tell you something." Daniel stepped forward, concern flickering across his face. "What is it?" "I've thought long and hard about it," she began, her words heavy with emotion. "And I've decided. I want to take a chance. I want to be with you. I want to try, Daniel. I want to leave the streets behind and start over." Daniel's eyes widened in disbelief, and then he stepped forward, pulling her into his arms. "You won't regret it, Amina. I promise." As Amina stood in his embrace, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hope. She was ready to face whatever came next, as long as she had Daniel by her side. But even as she embraced her new life, doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. Was she truly ready for the changes that were coming? Was she ready to give up everything she had known for a life that seemed so foreign? The following weeks were a whirlwind of change for Amina. She had moved into a small, cozy apartment that Daniel had arranged for her. It was a far cry from the dusty streets and crowded corners she had once called home. The apartment was clean, comfortable, and filled with warmth. There were soft, plush carpets on the floor, a big bed with white sheets, and large windows that let in the sunlight every morning. Amina had never known comfort like this. It felt surreal, like a dream that she might wake up from at any moment. But despite the luxury, Amina couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her chest. She had left her old life behind, her friends from the streets, the familiar sights of Lagos, and the independence that came with being on her own. Now, she was living in Daniel's world, and while it was everything she had ever wanted, it was also everything she feared. There were moments when Amina would find herself standing at the window, looking out at the city below, wondering if she had made the right choice. Was she really ready for this life? Could she truly fit in? Was she still the same person, or had she lost herself in the process? One evening, after a long day of trying to adjust to her new life, Amina went to a small cafe to clear her mind. It was one of the few places in the city where she felt a sense of normalcy, where the noise and bustle of Lagos were replaced by the simple pleasure of a hot cup of tea and a quiet corner. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. "I've been thinking about you all day. Can we talk tonight?" Amina stared at the message for a moment, feeling a rush of emotions. She had always been able to face challenges on her own, but now, with Daniel in her life, she realized that there were things she couldn't face alone. She needed him, she needed to talk to him, to figure out what this all meant. Later that evening, Daniel picked her up in his car, his usual smile lighting up his face when he saw her. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, his voice filled with warmth. Amina smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thanks," she replied, settling into the seat next to him. They drove in silence for a while, the sound of the engine humming in the background. Amina looked out the window, trying to find the words to explain how she felt. The life she had built with Daniel was everything she had ever wanted, but it was also overwhelming. She didn't know if she could handle the weight of it all. "Daniel," she began, her voice hesitant. "I'm grateful for everything you've done for me. You've given me a chance to have a better life, a life I never thought I could have. But I'm struggling." Daniel glanced at her, his brow furrowing with concern. "Struggling? How?" Amina took a deep breath, her hands clenched in her lap. "I don't feel like I belong in this world. I came from the streets, Daniel. I've spent my whole life just trying to survive. I don't know how to be someone different. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this. I don't know if I'm ready to leave my old life behind." Daniel stopped the car by the side of the road and turned to face her. He reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle and reassuring. "Amina," he said softly, his voice filled with understanding, "you don't have to be someone you're not. You're not losing yourself. You're growing. You're becoming the person you were always meant to be. I don't want you to be perfect. I just want you to be yourself." Amina looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. He was right. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to change who she was. She just had to take the steps forward, one at a time. "I'm scared, Daniel," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm scared that I won't be enough, that I won't fit into your world." Daniel smiled, his eyes softening with affection. "You are enough, Amina. You've always been enough. Don't let fear hold you back. Whatever happens, I'll be here with you. You don't have to do this alone." Amina felt the weight in her chest begin to lift. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly seen, truly understood. And for the first time, she realized that love didn't have to be perfect. It didn't have to fit into a mold or meet any expectations. It just had to be real. In that moment, she made a decision. She wasn't going to run from this life anymore. She wasn't going to be afraid of the unknown. She was going to embrace the changes, embrace the love, and embrace the future that awaited her, no matter how uncertain it seemed. The next morning, Amina woke up early and went for a walk through the city. As she strolled through the streets, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first met Daniel. She had changed, but she hadn't lost herself. She had learned that true love wasn't about perfection, it was about acceptance, understanding, and being willing to grow together. And in that moment, as the sun rose over the horizon, Amina knew that she was ready for whatever came next. She was ready to live. And so, Amina and Daniel's journey reminds us that no matter where we come from, love has the power to change everything. It's not about wealth, status, or what we have, it's about who we are and the hearts we choose to follow. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful story of love, transformation, and the courage to start anew. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible tales. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love and never stop dreaming.